The envelope arrived on a cold Tuesday in November. My fingers trembled as I held the cream-colored paper, bearing my name in a handwriting I recognized instantly, even after 2 decades without seeing it. Margaret Thompson. That was what he called me as a child. Always formal, never mommy like the other children. The smell of cinnamon and apples wafted from the neighbor's kitchen, reminding me of the Christmases we used to celebrate when Michael still lived here. When this 2-story Connecticut house still echoed with laughter instead of the heavy silence that had become my constant companion. Inside the envelope was a traditional Christmas card. A smiling family gathered around a golden tree, everything very perfect, very American. But it was the handwritten words that made my heart race. Mom, we'd love for you to join us for Christmas dinner this year. Sarah and the children are so excited to meet you. We look forward to seeing you on the 25th at 6 p.m. Love, Michael. Love. That word sounded strange coming from him. 20 years. 20 long years since he'd slammed the door and stormed out of this house, shouting that I'd ruined his life, that he'd rather have no mother than one like me. Back then, I was working 3 jobs just to keep this house. I cleaned offices in the early hours of the morning, worked as a cashier at the local supermarket during the day, and waited tables at a cheap restaurant in town at night. Michael was 17, a senior in high school, and I could barely afford the designer clothes he so desired. The other parents showed up at soccer games with new cars and expensive clothes, while I rushed home from work, still in my cleaning uniform, trying not to miss the few important moments in his life. The argument took place on a December night, just like today. I'd gotten home after midnight, exhausted, my feet aching in my cheap shoes that were already falling apart. Michael was in the living room, surrounded by college papers, those expensive applications to universities I knew we couldn't afford. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all the names that shone in his eyes like unattainable stars. He looked at me with that mixture of contempt and despair that still haunts my nightmares. You know I can't afford that, I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was so tired of pretending our financial situation was different than it actually was. The electric bill was 2 months overdue. The car was making strange noises I knew I couldn't ignore much longer, and the money I'd saved for Christmas had been used to fix the heater that broke during the first snowfall of the year. Other mothers can, he replied, his words cutting deep. Jake's mom works part-time at a clothing store and managed to put him through Stanford. Emma's mom doesn't even work, and Emma goes to Columbia. Why do I have to be the only one who can't have what he wants? His eyes were red, not from tears, but from anger. An anger that had built up for years, fueled by every no I'd had to throw him. Every party he couldn't go to because he didn't have the right clothes. Every school trip he'd missed because there simply wasn't enough money. I tried to explain again. I tried to talk about his father's life insurance, which barely covered the funeral expenses. About the mortgage on this house that consumed almost half my income. About how I was doing the best I could with what I had. How every penny I earned was for him, for us, for our future. But the words came out all wrong, sounding like cheap excuses. And I could see in his eyes that nothing I said would make a difference. You're a failure, he said. And those words still echo in my head every night before I fall asleep. Every other mother my age has achieved something. You're 42 and cleaning other people's toilets. You have no education, no ambition, nothing to offer me but poverty and shame. Each word was a stab, calculated to hurt, to destroy any shred of dignity I might have left. That night, I cried on the kitchen floor until I had no more tears. The cold linoleum against my face, the squeak of the old refrigerator that had needed replacing for years, the dripping of the faucet I couldn't fix. The house felt bigger and emptier than ever, as if his words had sucked all the life left within these walls. I considered giving up. I considered selling everything and starting over somewhere where no one knew me, where I wouldn't have to carry the weight of my own son's disappointed gaze. 2 weeks later, he graduated. I was there, in the audience, wearing my only good dress that was starting to feel tight in all the wrong places. When his name was called, I clapped until my hands were red, proud despite myself. He'd earned a partial scholarship to State University, not Harvard, not Yale, but a good school nonetheless. I thought maybe he'd understand I'd done my best, that maybe there was room for forgiveness between us. But when the ceremony was over, when the other parents were taking pictures with their children, planning graduation parties and summer trips, Michael came to me with that familiar look in his eyes. "I won't need you anymore," he said simply. "I got a summer job that pays well, and I'll be living in the dorm year-round. I don't have to go home anymore." The word home sounded like an insult in his mouth. It was the last conversation we had. He packed up his things one August afternoon while I was at work. When I returned, his room was empty except for a bare bed and some old clothes he hadn't wanted to take. Not a note, not a thanks for 18 years, just the emptiness where my son used to be and the echo of the cruel words he'd left behind. The years that followed were the loneliest of my life. I kept working, kept paying the mortgage on this house too big for one person, kept putting money into a savings account I called Michael's college fund, even though I knew he would never come home. Through acquaintances, I learned that he had graduated, that he had landed a good job in Boston, that he had married a teacher named Sarah, that they had 2 daughters, that he had built the life he always wanted away from me, away from poverty, away from the shame of having a mother who cleaned toilets for a living. Sometimes, during long winter nights, I'd find myself wondering what my grandchildren would be like, if they'd have Michael's green eyes or take after Sarah, if he'd tell them stories about me, or if I was just a ghost from the past he'd rather forget. On important dates, birthdays, graduations, weddings, I'd send cards to the address I'd gotten from a distant cousin. I never received a reply. The cards probably went straight to the trash, but I kept sending them anyway, because it was the only connection I had left with the boy I'd raised alone for 18 years. And now this invitation. This invitation arrived 3 months after the news spread through our small town. Margaret Thompson had won the lottery. No small sum, $350 million. After taxes, it was still over $200 million. Enough money to buy the whole of Harvard if I wanted. Enough money to make my son finally proud of me, or at least pretend to be. I clutched the card to my chest, feeling the weight of 2 decades of silence between us. The cinnamon scent from the neighbor's house still fills my kitchen, mixed now with something more bitter. The realization that maybe, just maybe, my son wasn't inviting me because he missed me. Maybe he was inviting me because I finally had something he wanted. And for the first time in 20 years, I don't know if this makes me happy or breaks my heart in a whole new way. The question that echoes in my head as I look at the card is simple, yet terrifying. What happens when we discover that the love we thought we'd lost may have a price? And more importantly, am I willing to pay that price for the privilege of meeting my grandchildren and having my son back in my life? The next morning I wake with the bitter taste of insomnia in my mouth and the certainty that I need to make a decision. The card is on the nightstand, where I left it last night after reading it 100 times, searching for clues between the lines, for some sign that maybe, just maybe, there was something genuine in that invitation. But the words remain the same, cold, polite, calculated. There's no "I miss you" or "I'm thinking of you." Just courtesy disguised as familial affection, wrapped in a suspicious urgency that arrived exactly 3 months after news of the lottery spread through the local newspapers. The phone rings at 7:40 in the morning, pulling me from my thoughts. It's Dorothy, my neighbor of 15 years, the only person who's stood by me through all these years of solitude. Her harsh, chain-smoking voice cuts through the morning silence. "Maggie, dear, I saw the commotion at your house last night. Did you have any visitors?" Dorothy always knew everything that happened on our quiet street. She was the one who brought me soup when I was sick. She was the one who signed for my mail when I traveled to the rare work conferences. She was the one who sat with me on Michael's birthday nights, when the loneliness became unbearable. "It wasn't a visit," I reply, my voice still hoarse from interrupted sleep. "It was a letter. From Michael." The silence on the other end is so profound that for a moment I think the line has dropped. Dorothy knows the whole story. She was the one who helped me paint his room back to a neutral color when I finally accepted he was never coming back. She was the one who held me as I cried in the backyard, burning the photos he left behind in a desperate attempt to stop waiting for a son who saw me as a failure. "What kind of letter?" she asks, and I can hear the distrust in her voice. Dorothy never liked Michael, not even when he was a child. She said he was cold-hearted, that he treated people he considered beneath him badly. She was right, of course. But at the time, I defended my son with the ferocity of a blind mother who refuses to see the flaws in her own upbringing. "He wants something, doesn't he?" She continues, and her words cut deep because they verbalize exactly what I've been trying to deny since yesterday. I tell her about the Christmas invitation, about the family he built that I never knew, about the children who are my grandchildren but who don't even know I exist. Dorothy listens silently, and I can picture her in her kitchen, stirring the coffee with that silver spoon she inherited from her mother, her brow furrowed in an expression I know well. When I finish, she lets out a long, bitter sigh. "Margaret Thompson, you are the smartest woman I know when it comes to everything in life except that boy. He hasn't contacted you in the last 20 years. Not when he heard you had that car accident. Not when you were in the hospital for 2 weeks with pneumonia." She's right, and that truth hurts like an open wound. Over the years, there were times when I truly needed him, when I had to have that knee surgery and couldn't work properly for 3 months, when the cleaning company went bankrupt and I was unemployed for 6 months, surviving on my meager savings and Dorothy's kindness. When I discovered those suspicious lumps in my breast that, thank God, were benign, but which kept me awake for weeks wondering if I would die alone in this big house, with no one to hold my hand. But now, Dorothy continues, her voice hardening, now that you have enough money to buy all of Boston, suddenly you're family again. Suddenly the granddaughters are eager to meet the grandma they never knew existed. Her words are like slaps in the face, painful because they're true. I want to argue. I want to defend Michael, to find excuses for the all-too-convenient timing of this invitation. But I can't. The facts speak for themselves, and they paint a picture I don't want to accept. After I hang up the phone, I sit in the kitchen for over an hour, watching the steam rise from my cup of coffee as it cools without being touched. This house was once full of life. There were Saturday mornings with burnt pancakes and fights over homework. There were Sunday afternoons with Michael doing school projects at the dining room table, complaining about teachers who didn't understand him, dreaming out loud about the bright future that awaited him. Now, the silence is so sick, I can hear the ticking of the wall clock and the creaking of the floorboards when I move. The truth is, during all these years of silence, I've constructed a romanticized version of my relationship with Michael. In my memories, edited by longing and guilt, he was just a confused teenager who said things he didn't really mean. I convinced myself he'd eventually realize I'd done the best I could, that maturity would bring him back to me with apologies and tight hugs. But sitting here, with the invitation in front of me, I'm forced to confront a much more painful possibility. Maybe Michael knew exactly what he was doing all along. Maybe he never loved me the way I thought he did. I grab my bag and leave the house for the first time since receiving the letter. I need fresh air. I need to feel like I still exist outside the walls of this house that has become both my prison and my sanctuary. The morning is chilly, the kind of cold that cuts through the thickest coat and settles into the bones. The streets of our small town feel different now that I'm a wealthy woman. My neighbors look at me with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed envy. Some wave politely, others look away, as if wealth were contagious in a way that makes them uncomfortable. At the local bakery, where I've bought my daily bread for over 20 years, the owner, Mrs. Patterson, greets me with an exaggerated smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Margaret, dear, how are you handling all this change?" she asks, and I can feel the other customers lowering their conversations to hear my answer. Gossip travels fast in a small town, and I know my story. The abandoned mother who became rich overnight. is the entertainment of the week for people who have little excitement in their own lives. I'm fine. Thanks, I reply, paying for my bread and leaving before she can ask any more questions. But I'm not fine. I'm confused, hurt, and lonelier than ever. Money hasn't filled the void Michael left when he slammed the door 2 decades ago. If anything, it's made that void more obvious, more glaring. Now I have the resources to do anything, go anywhere, buy anything, except the genuine love of my own son. When I return home, there's another envelope in my mailbox. My heart races, thinking it might be another letter from Michael, perhaps explaining his intentions further, perhaps expressing some genuine regret for the lost years. But it's just another charity request, one of dozens I've received daily since the lottery news became public. Everyone wants a piece of my good fortune. Charities, distant relatives who never knew I existed. People with heartbreaking stories of terminal illnesses and unpayable debts. The irony is not lost on me. Now that I have money to help, everyone wants me. When I was poor, when I truly understood what it meant to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying decent food, no one sought me out. Now I'm bombarded with requests from people who assume my wealth comes with a moral obligation to solve the world's problems. And maybe it does. Maybe this is my penance for years of bitterness and self-pity. But Michael isn't just another person seeking money. Or at least he shouldn't be. He's my son, the boy I carried for 9 months. The one I cried about when he was born with respiratory problems and had to stay in the neonatal intensive care unit for 2 weeks. The boy whose first steps I filmed with that old, barely working camera. The boy I read stories to every night, even when I came home exhausted from work. Does that same boy now see me as nothing more than a means to an end? I sit in the living room on the same couch where Michael used to do his homework, where we watched movies on Friday nights when he was still young enough to want to spend time with me. Memories come flooding back. His laughter when I made funny voices during reading. The pride in his eyes when I managed to help him with math problems. The way he would cuddle against me during thunderstorms, before he decided showing affection to his mother was something to be ashamed of. The question that torments me isn't whether I should accept the invitation. Of course I will. I will accept because it's 20 years of longing condensed into an opportunity that may never come again. I will accept because despite everything, I still love that impossible boy who became a man who perhaps never loved me the way I thought he did. The real question is, what do I do when I discover that my worst suspicions about his motives are true? How do I protect my heart from a second rejection that could be even more devastating than the first? I pick up the phone and dial the number on the card. My hands tremble as I wait for someone to answer. On the other end, a sweet, polite female voice. Morrison residence. Morrison. He's changed his last name. He's even erased this last connection with me. Hello? The voice repeats, and I realize I've been silent for too long. I'd like to speak with Michael, I finally manage. I'm Margaret Thompson. I'm his mother. The words sound strange, as if I'm introducing myself to a stranger, which is perhaps exactly what I'm doing. Oh, the voice on the other end hesitates, and I can feel the discomfort through the telephone wires. Let me call him for you. Sarah. It has to be Sarah, the wife he chose, the mother of my grandchildren, the woman who filled the place in his life that I once thought would be mine forever. There's a muffled murmur in the background, hushed voices in a conversation that's clearly about me. I can picture the scene, her covering the mouthpiece, telling him that your mother is on the line, perhaps with that expression of polite surprise that well-mannered people wear when confronted with inconvenient relatives who supposedly no longer exist. Minutes pass. Long, endless minutes where I can hear household sounds in the background. Dishes being washed, a television on, children's voices laughing over some game. This is the soundtrack to the life Michael built without me. The family he created where I was carefully edited out of the narrative. The children probably don't even know they have a grandmother. For them, there's probably only their mother's side of the family, with grandparents who come for Sunday visits and send birthday cards, while their father's side is a convenient mystery that never needed explaining. "Hello, Mom." His voice is deeper now, tempered by 2 decades of adulthood, but it still has that particular inflection he used when being formal with me. Never hi or hello, always that distant formality he adopted as a teenager and seemingly never abandoned. I can feel my heart racing, a mixture of joy at hearing his voice again and terror of what comes next. "Thank you for returning my call," he continues, as if I were a potential client or a business colleague. Michael is all I can manage at first. His name feels strange on my lips after so many years of speaking of him only to Dorothy, or whispering to the empty walls of this house on nights when the loneliness became unbearable. "I received your invitation." I keep my voice steady, though my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the phone. 20 years of unspoken words crowd my throat. Apologies, explanations, declarations of love and longing that he probably doesn't want to hear. "That's great," he replies, and I can hear something shuffling in the background, maybe papers or dishes. He's doing something else while he talks to me, dividing his attention as if this conversation were just another item on a to-do list. Sarah thought it would be a good opportunity to reconnect. Girls are at an age where they start asking questions about family. No, I don't know what it's like, because he made sure I never had the chance to find out what it's like to be a grandmother, what it's like to watch grandchildren grow up, what it's like to be part of a family that extends beyond a single, lonely person in a silent house. There's an uncomfortable pause, and I can feel them both weighing our words carefully, like diplomats negotiating a ceasefire after a long, bitter war. "How are you?" he finally asks, and the question sounds automated, like something you say because social etiquette demands it, not because you truly want to know the answer. How am I? How can I explain 2 decades of loneliness? How can I condense years of Christmases spent alone, birthdays forgotten, illnesses endured without support, into a polite response to a question asked out of obligation? "I'm fine," I lie. "Working less lately." It's a gentle way to address the elephant in the room, the fact that winning $350 million in the lottery tends to make work optional. I expect some reaction, some acknowledgement of the dramatic change in my circumstances, but he just makes a non-committal sound, as if my good fortune is as irrelevant as the weather. Of course he already knows. Everyone in the area knows. It's probably been headline news in Boston too. "Good for you," he says, his words carefully neutral, devoid of any real emotion. There's no genuine happiness for my good fortune, not even curiosity about how I'm handling such a radical change. It's as if he's talking about something that happened to a distant acquaintance, not the woman who sacrificed everything to raise him alone for 18 years. "So about Christmas," he continues, quickly changing the subject. "It's at 6 o'clock. Casual dinner, nothing too elaborate. Informal." The word strikes me strangely. During all these years dreaming of reconciliation, I imagined big emotional moments, tight hugs, tears of regret, long conversations where we would finally resolve our problems. I never imagined something informal, something casual, as if 20 years of separation were just a minor misunderstanding that could be resolved over a polite dinner. "Will the girls be there?" I ask, because I need to know that I will meet my grandchildren, that this invitation is not just an empty formality. "Of course," he replies, and for the first time, I hear something that might be a smile in his voice. Emma is 9, very talkative, loves stories. Lily is 7, more shy, but affectionate once she gets used to you. They know you exist, of course, as if it were obvious that a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old would know about the existence of a grandmother they'd never seen, never spoken to, never received a gift or birthday card from because they had no idea she was alive and thinking about them every day. The way he talks about the girls awakens something in me, a desperate hunger for details, for connection, for any scrap of information about these children who are half me but complete strangers. "What else do they like?" I ask, my voice sounding more anxious than I intend. "Emma likes art. Does Lily play any sports? I want to know everything." I want to recapture 9 and 7 years of lost stories, first steps, first words, first days of school. I want to fill the enormous void where my grandmotherly love should be. They're good kids, he says vaguely, and I can feel myself asking too many questions, showing too much interest, revealing an emotional hunger that makes him uncomfortable. You'll like them. The conversation is cooling again, returning to that polite formality that seems to be the only tone he can maintain with me. There's no warmth, no nostalgia, no acknowledgement of the lost years or the relationship we used to have before everything fell apart. Michael, I say, my voice shaking slightly, I know things ended badly between us. I know you were hurt, and I was too, but I've thought about it every day for these 20 years. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you, that I haven't wanted to fix things between us. The words come out in a rush, as if I'm afraid he'll hang up before I can say everything I need to say. I know I wasn't the perfect mother. I know I let you down, but I've always loved you, always. Silence. A long, heavy silence that stretches for seconds that feel like hours. I can hear my own breathing, the sound of the heater turning on, the distant echo of domestic life in his house. A life that continues as normal while I pour my heart out over the airwaves. Mom, he finally says, and his voice has a weary quality, as if this emotional conversation is a burden he'd rather avoid. That was a long time ago. We're different people now. Different people. The sentence cuts deep because it's both true and false at the same time. I'm different, older, wiser, certainly richer. But inside, I'm still the same woman who cried when he left, who kept his room untouched for years, who sent birthday cards to an address she wasn't even sure was correct. He may have become a different person. He may have built an identity that doesn't include his humble origins and his hard-working mother. But I'm still the same Margaret who loved him unconditionally, even when he rejected me with cruel words. Maybe, I agree, because I don't know what else to say. But we're still family. The word comes out filled with hope and despair. A last plea for recognition, for connection, for anything that proves that the 18 years I spent raising him meant something more than just a fulfilled obligation. Family. A word that once meant everything to me and now sounds empty and meaningless. A concept that apparently needs to be redefined or perhaps simply accepted as lost forever. Yes, he agrees, but his voice doesn't carry the same hope I put into the word. Well then, we'll expect you on the 25th, 6 p.m. The address is on the card. He's ending the conversation, creating a polite exit before things get too emotional. Before I can ask any more awkward questions or express any more feelings, he clearly doesn't want to discuss. Sarah's looking forward to meeting you, and so are the girls. Can I get him anything? I ask, desperate to prolong the conversation, to maintain this fragile connection for a few more seconds. Dessert? Gifts for the girls? Gifts. This is a language he might understand better now. Expensive gifts, gifts that show I finally have the resources he always blamed me for lacking, gifts that can buy temporary smiles and create superficial memories, even if they can't buy genuine love. No need to bother, he responds quickly, perhaps afraid of seeming too self-serving, or perhaps genuinely uncomfortable with the idea of accepting gifts from me. Just show up. That's enough. Enough. As if my presence were a concession he was making, not a gift I was offering. As if I should be grateful for the opportunity to meet my own grandchildren, to sit at the table with my own son after 2 decades of silence. The conversation ends with polite formality. See you then. Thanks for calling. Bye. Empty words that could be exchanged between polite strangers. When I hang up the phone, I sit in the silent kitchen, processing what has just happened. I've spoken to my son for the first time in 20 years, and somehow I feel lonelier than before. There was no acknowledgement of the pain we both carry, no attempt at true reconciliation, no love, only practical arrangements for a meeting that may be my only chance to regain some piece of the family I lost so long ago. The days following that phone conversation passed in a strange haze of anxiety and obsessive preparation. I wake up every morning with a knot in my stomach, as if I have a crucial job interview or a medical exam that could change my life forever. In fact, perhaps that's exactly what it is, a test to determine if I still deserve the title of mother after 2 decades of involuntary absence. If I can earn back a place in Michael's life through exemplary behavior and, of course, appropriate financial generosity. I spent hours at the mall, something I haven't done in years, trying to find the perfect gift for grandchildren I've never met. The toy store is a maze of possibilities and pitfalls. What is a 9-year-old girl like these days? And a 7-year-old? I feel like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture, observing other confident grandmothers who know exactly what their grandchildren want. They talk about Emma's unicorn phase and Jake's soccer obsession. Intimate conversations about personalities they've known since birth. After 3 hours of paralyzing indecision, I choose safe but expensive gifts. 2 professional art kits complete with paints, brushes, special papers, and portable easels. If Emma likes art, as Michael vaguely mentioned, this should cover all the bases. For Lily, I choose a collection of beautifully illustrated children's books about the adventures of brave girls, hoping it will encourage both reading and confidence. These are gifts that scream, rich grandma trying to impress, but I can't help it. Money is the only language I'm sure Michael understands. At the jewelry store, I buy Sarah a delicate necklace, not too expensive to seem ostentatious, but expensive enough to show respect for the woman who took my place in his life. The salesperson, an elderly man with thick glasses, comments on how beautiful it is to see such a caring mother-in-law. Mother-in-law. The word hits me like a punch. Sarah has been my daughter-in-law for years, but I didn't even know her last name until this week. There are wedding photos I've never seen, a ceremony where my seat was empty, vows exchanged without the groom's mother present to weep with pride. I buy new clothes for myself too, something I haven't done in years. In the dressing room mirror, a 62-year-old woman stares back at me, hair grayer than I remember, wrinkles around her eyes that tell the story of 2 decades of worry and loneliness, a body that bears the weight of years of hard work and solitary meals eaten carelessly. Will Michael recognize the woman who used to make pancakes on Saturdays and help him with his math homework? Or am I now just a stranger who shares some characteristics with an unpleasant memory from the past? The saleswoman, a young woman about the age Michael was when he rejected me, is overly helpful when she discovers I'm that Margaret Thompson from the lottery. She calls me Mom and suggests clothes that are elegant but not ostentatious, as if she instinctively knows I'm trying to make the right impression on people who have been judging me for 20 years. I choose a simple but well-cut navy blue dress, comfortable flat shoes, and a coat that suggests prosperity without shouting new wealth. At home, I rehearse imaginary conversations with my grandchildren. Hi Emma, I'm your Grandma Margaret. I brought you some paintbrushes. Too formal. Hello darlings, I'm the grandma you never met because your daddy hates me. Too honest. Girls, it's so nice to finally meet you. Too fake. How do you talk to children who should have known you since birth but were raised as if you didn't exist? How do you explain a decade-long absence without blaming their parents? Dorothy visits me on Christmas Eve, finding me sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by expensive wrapping paper and gold ribbons. You look like someone preparing for their own execution, she comments, lighting a cigarette despite my constant objections. Margaret, dear, you need to stop treating this like a royal hearing where you need to prove your worthiness. You're his mother, for God's sake. You don't need to buy forgiveness. But I do, and we both know it. Forgiveness isn't something earned through merit or a history of good conduct when you've been found guilty of 20 years of poverty and failure. Forgiveness, in this case, comes wrapped in expensive wrapping paper and sealed with tangible proof that I've finally become the kind of mother Michael always wanted. One who can open doors with money, who can give her granddaughters experiences and opportunities he didn't have, who can finally live up to the impossible standard he set for herself as a teenager. What if they don't like me? I asked Dorothy, voicing the fear that's been keeping me awake for nights. What if Emma and Lily think I'm weird or creepy or just plain irrelevant? What if Michael spent all these years telling them stories about how I disappointed him, and they've already formed opinions about who I am before they even met me? Dorothy blows smoke toward the window and looks at me with that expression that means she's about to say something I don't want to hear, but need to. Margaret, she says slowly, you're asking the wrong questions. The question isn't whether they'll like you. The question is, will you be able to like them if you discover their little versions of Michael? And, more importantly, will you be able to maintain your dignity when you realize this dinner isn't about family reconciliation, but about Michael presenting his wealthy mother to his daughters as some kind of disposable income? His words cut deep because they verbalize exactly what I've been trying not to think about. What if Emma and Lily are polite but cold, trained to be polite to the rich stranger who's appeared in their lives? What if they ask questions about why I never visited them, never sent them birthday presents, never been present in their lives, questions to which I have no answers that won't make Michael seem cruel? What if this dinner is just an audition for the role of convenient grandmother, who shows up for special occasions and financial emergencies? That night, I lie awake staring at the ceiling, remembering all the Christmas Eves spent alone in this house, 20 Christmases without a tree, because decorating for one person seemed too pathetic, 20 Christmas Eves watching movies about families reuniting and forgiving each other, crying silently on the couch while wondering where Michael was, if he had children, if he ever thought of me during the holidays we used to celebrate together. I remember the last Christmas we spent together when he was 17. I'd worked double shifts for weeks to buy him the basketball shoes he wanted, a pair too expensive for our budget, but I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in his eyes at Christmas. When he opened the gift, his face lit up for exactly 3 seconds before darkening again. "Thank you," he said, but without enthusiasm. I later found out that the model I'd bought was already out of style, and that all the cool kids were now wearing a different, even more expensive version. This memory sums up our relationship perfectly. I was always one step behind his expectations, always trying to meet a constantly shifting standard, always failing in small ways that were huge to a teenager obsessed with social status. And now, 2 decades later, I'm doing the same thing, trying desperately to be good enough, rich enough, adequate enough to deserve a place in the life he built without me. Christmas morning dawns gray and cold, with the kind of low sky that promises snow but never delivers. I take a long shower, groom myself carefully, and check my appearance in the mirror a dozen times. The woman looking back at me looks respectable, prosperous, and harmless, exactly the kind of grandmother an upper-middle-class family would expect. Nothing about my appearance suggests the decades of manual labor, the sleepless nights worrying about bills, the years of ramen-based meals to spare for Michael's needs. I load the gifts into the car carefully, as if they were bombs that could explode if mishandled. The GPS shows a 45-minute drive to the suburb where Michael lives, a world of well-kept colonials, perfect lawns, and expensive SUVs parked in 2-car garages. It's the kind of neighborhood he's always dreamed of living in, the kind of life I could never give him, and one he's clearly achieved despite his disabled upbringing. As I drive through familiar streets that gradually transform into more prosperous neighborhoods, a terrible realization sets in. No matter how this dinner ends, no matter how well I behave or how generous my gifts, I will never truly be forgiven for my past crimes. At best, I will be tolerated. At worst, I will be used. But even being used is better than remaining invisible. So I continue driving toward my destination, carrying 2 decades of hope and terror in equal measure. Michael's house is exactly what I would imagine if I had to draw the upper-middle-class American dream on paper. 2 stories of red brick with white trim, perfectly framed windows, a covered porch where an expensive, coordinated wreath hangs from the front door. The lawn is a uniform green carpet that has never seen a weed, and a silver SUV sits in the open driveway next to a navy blue sedan. Everything is impeccable. Everything is planned. Everything screams success and stability. The 2 things he most often accused me of never being able to give him. I sit in the car for a full 5 minutes, my hands glued to the steering wheel, looking at this life my son has built without me. There are children's bikes carefully stored in the garage, a basketball hoop in the driveway, pots of flowers that someone, probably Sarah, waters religiously. It's a home where children grow up financially secure, where there are no arguments over overdue electricity bills or choices between medicine and food. It's everything I dreamed of being able to give Michael, materialized through his own efforts and perhaps in spite of me. When I finally get out of the car, my legs tremble slightly. The cold December air bites my face, but sweat trickles down my back. I carry the carefully wrapped gifts as shields against the anxiety that threatens to paralyze me. On the porch, I hesitate before ringing the doorbell. This is the last time I'll be just Margaret Thompson, the woman who won the lottery. In a few seconds, I'll once again become Michael's mother, the girl's grandmother, with all the expectations and disappointments that those titles entail. The door opens before I can ring the bell, as if someone were watching me from the window. Sarah appears in the doorway, a beautiful woman in her 40s, with neatly cropped brown hair and a dark green cashmere sweater that probably cost more than I made in a month when I was a housekeeper. Her eyes are kind but wary, as if she's assessing a potentially dangerous animal. "Margaret," she says, her voice polite but not warm. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Please come in." The interior of the house is straight out of a home decor magazine. Coordinated neutral tones, furniture clearly chosen by a professional, abstract art on the walls that suggests cultural sophistication. Everything is overly tidy, overly clean, as if hours had been spent preparing for a military inspection. The scent of cinnamon and rosemary wafts from the kitchen, mixed with something floral that must be an expensive air freshener. It's the smell of a home where nothing ever goes wrong, where there are never dirty dishes in the sink or forgotten socks on the couch. "Michael is finishing up some things in the kitchen," Sarah continues, leading me into the living room. "The girls are excited to meet you, but you know how shy kids can be at first." Her words are carefully chosen, neutral, revealing nothing about what she really thinks of me or this situation. Does she know the whole story? Has Michael told her about the arguments, the cruel words we exchanged, the 20 years of silence? Or am I just the mother who lived far away in the official family narrative? "Where can I put the gifts?" I ask, clutching the bags as if they're my only anchor in this sea of polite discomfort. Sarah points to a coffee table that probably costs more than my old car. "That's great. How kind of you." Kindness, as if buying gifts for my own grandchildren is a favor I'm doing, not a desperate grandmother trying to make up for years of forced absence with material possessions. Then I hear them, children's voices coming from upstairs, high-pitched laughter and running footsteps. My heart races. These are my granddaughters, my flesh and blood, two little people who exist in this world, but know nothing about me beyond what they've recently been told. Emma and Lily. Names I've repeated in my head hundreds of times since Michael mentioned them on the phone, trying to imagine faces, personalities, the little quirks and preferences that make each child unique. "Emma, Lily, come meet Grandma Margaret," Sarah calls, her voice taking on that special tone adults use when they're organizing meaningful moments for children. I hear whispers upstairs, shuffling feet, the kind of silent negotiation that happens when children are told to be polite to strangers. My stomach lurches. To them I'm a stranger who appeared out of nowhere with expensive gifts and claims of kinship that must sound too abstract to be real. Two girls descend the stairs slowly, the older one clearly protective of the younger. Emma is tall for 9, with Michael's green eyes and dark hair that she wears in a messy ponytail. There's blue paint under her nails. She really likes art. Lily is smaller, shyer, partially hiding behind her sister, with brown curls reminiscent of old photos of Michael as a child. Both wear expensive but comfortable clothes, the kind of clothes kids wear when their parents have enough money to buy quality without worrying about the price. "Girls," Sarah says gently, "this is Margaret, Daddy's mom. Remember we talked about her? Emma studies me with the curious intensity of children, while Lily hides even more behind her sister. There's no familial recognition, no instant connection between grandmother and granddaughters that I naively expected. We are strangers observing each other across a chasm of lost years and inadequate explanations. "Hello, girls," I say, my voice sounding more formal than intended. "I brought you some gifts." I immediately hate myself for starting with gifts. It's like I'm confirming that I'm exactly the kind of relative who tries to buy affection, who has nothing more substantial to offer than material goods. But how else can I connect with children who don't know me? How can I show love to people who are strangers, despite carrying my DNA? "Thank you," Emma says politely but without enthusiasm. She's clearly been trained in good manners. "Mom said you live far away, so you've never visited before." The innocence of her statement hits me like a punch. You live far away. That's how they explained my decade-long absence. Not your grandmother and your father fought. Not there were family problems. Just you live far away. As if geography were the only barrier between us. It's true, I agree, because I can't destroy the carefully constructed narratives Sarah and Michael have created to shield the girls from the complicated truths about our dysfunctional family. But I'm so happy to finally meet them. Happy is an inadequate word for the whirlwind of emotions I feel looking at these two little people who should be central to my life but are essentially polite strangers. Then Michael appears in the doorway and 20 years disappear in an instant. He's taller than I remember, fuller, with a few lines around his eyes and gray at his temples that make him look distinguished rather than old. He wears a light blue dress shirt and chinos, the informal uniform of the American upper middle class. He looks exactly like the kind of successful man he always dreamed of becoming. The complete opposite of the image he had of himself at 18, when he blamed me for all his perceived failures. "Mom," he says, and the word feels strange on his lips, as if he's trying on a shoe he hasn't worn in decades. There's no hug, no kiss on the cheek, just a polite nod. "Welcome to our home." Our home. The emphasis is subtle but clear. This is his and Sarah's home, the space they've built together, where I'm a guest, not family. He moves to stand beside Sarah, a solid unit, presenting a united front against the intruder from the past who has dared to appear in their present. The girls rush to him immediately, Emma clinging to his left arm while Lily clutches his right hand. The ease of their interaction breaks my heart. This is the relationship Michael and I should have had. This natural affection, this absolute trust. He smiles at them in a way I've never seen him smile at me, not even when I was little. There's genuine love there, proud fatherhood, the kind of emotional connection he always accused me of failing to create. "Daddy," Emma says, "Grandma Margaret brought us presents." The way she says Grandma Margaret sounds experimental, as if she's testing how the words fit in her mouth. To her, I'm not Grandma naturally, I'm Grandma Margaret, a formal title attached to my name like a credential that needs explaining. "Can I open it now?" Michael looks at me with an expression I can't quite decipher. There's something that might be gratitude mixed with discomfort, as if my generosity puts him in an awkward position he'd rather avoid. "Sure," he says to Emma, "but first let's have dinner. Grandma Margaret drove a long way to get here." Again, that reference to distance, to geography as an explanation for everything that's wrong with our family situation. Dinner is served in the formal dining room, on a polished mahogany table that reflects the crystal chandelier like the surface of a tranquil lake. Sarah has prepared an impressive feast, perfectly golden roast turkey, creamy mashed potatoes, cranberry stuffing, almondine green beans, and homemade gravy that smells like memories of Christmases we never had together. It's the kind of meal that requires planning, time, and resources, luxuries I never could afford when I was raising Michael alone with 3 jobs and overdue bills. I sit in the chair Sarah indicates, directly across from Michael, with the girls on either side like innocent little mediators between 2 decades of unresolved grief. The table is set with china that's likely a family heirloom, Sarah's family, of course, since Michael discarded any connection to his humble origins when he changed his surname. Linen napkins, crystal glasses for wine that cost more per bottle than I used to spend on food in an entire week. Everything looks beautiful, I tell Sarah, and it's true. The table looks like something out of a magazine, the kind of Christmas setting I used to see in TV commercials and dream of creating for Michael. You must have worked all day getting this ready. Sarah smiles politely, but I can see the tension around her eyes. She knows this isn't just a normal family gathering. She can feel the electric current of unresolved history running between Michael and me like a live wire. It was a pleasure, she replies, serving generous portions on each plate. Michael told me you always cooked very well, too. This is a surprise. Did Michael talk about me to her? And even more surprising, did he say anything positive? During his growing years, especially after he began to resent me for our financial situation, he often complained about my simple cooking, comparing my ramen dinners to the elaborate meals his friends' parents prepared. The girls eat in relative silence, occasionally whispering to each other, watching me with that unabashed curiosity only children possess. Emma is clearly the more outgoing of the two. She asks me direct questions about where I live, if I have pets, why my hair is grayer than Grandma Sarah's. Grandma Sarah. She has another grandmother, of course, probably one who's been there since birth, who knows her favorite foods and has photos of them scattered around the house, who receives handmade cards on Grandparents' Day. Lily remains more reserved, but I can see her studying me when she thinks I'm not looking. She has Michael's eyes, not just the color, but that analytical intensity he developed as a child, as if he were constantly evaluating situations and people, looking for flaws or inconsistencies. It's disconcerting to see this trait in a 7-year-old, especially when I'm the object of his silent analysis. So, Michael says, after we've all finished our appetizers, his voice taking on that polite conversational tone one uses with distant acquaintances. How have you been spending your time lately? I guess you don't have to work so much anymore. The hesitation before work is deliberate and cruel. He can't even bring himself to say cleaning bathrooms or waiting tables in front of his daughters and wife. My history of hard labor is an embarrassment he prefers to keep vague, transformed into polite euphemisms. I've been keeping busy, I answer carefully, doing some home improvements, thinking about maybe traveling a bit. It's a safe, empty answer that reveals nothing of the crushing loneliness that has filled my days since winning the lottery. The money solved all my practical problems, but didn't touch the emotional void that comes from spending 20 years without family, with no purpose other than surviving the next day. What about you? How has the year been for you? Sarah takes over the conversation, talking about Michael's promotion at work. He's now CFO of a tech company. The girls' extracurricular activities, Emma takes piano and art lessons, Lily plays soccer and ballet, and the kitchen renovation they did last summer. It's typical upper-middle-class family conversation, full of accomplishments, expensive activities, home improvements that cost more than I owned in years. A life built on solid foundations I could never provide. As she speaks, I watch Michael interact with his daughters. He cuts Lily's meat automatically without her needing to ask. He wipes sauce from Emma's chin with a napkin, smiling when she grimaces. These are small, unconscious gestures, the kind of attentive, present fatherhood that only comes from daily practice over years. I used to do this for him, I remember, before he was old enough to be embarrassed by my calloused hands touching his face in public. Emma's doing really well in art class, Sarah continues, and I can see the girl straighten with pride. The teacher said she has natural talent. Maybe it's something she inherited. There's a significant pause, and I realize Sarah is offering me an opening to connect with my granddaughters through a shared interest. It's a kind gesture, but also calculated, a way to include me in the conversation without treading into emotionally dangerous territory. I'd love to see some of your drawings, I say to Emma, and her face lights up for the first time since I arrived. I used to draw when I was younger. Not very good, but I always liked art. It's a small, Harmless lie. I never had the time or resources for hobbies like art when I was younger, but it's worth it to see the genuine interest in Emma's eyes. Finally, a connection, however tenuous. "You can see my room," Emma says excitedly, turning to Michael. "Can I show my drawings to Grandma Margaret after dinner?" Michael hesitates, and I can see the calculation behind his eyes. Allowing me to see his daughter's room is a level of familial intimacy he might not be prepared to grant. But denying his daughter's request would mean explaining why, which would lead to questions he clearly prefers to avoid. "Sure," he finally agrees, but his voice is strained. "After we've finished eating and you've opened your presents." Gifts. The word hangs in the air like a promise and a threat. We all know my gifts are expensive, that they represent my desperate attempt to make up for years of absence with material generosity. But we also know that gifts can create expectations, obligations, and emotional connections that some people at the table may not be prepared to handle. Lily finally speaks, her voice small but clear. "Daddy, why hasn't Grandma Margaret ever come to visit us before?" The innocent question lands on the table like a bomb, creating an instant, heavy silence. Sarah stops chewing. Michael visibly tenses. Emma looks between us all, clearly sensing her sister has touched on a sensitive subject, even if she doesn't understand why. It's the question we've all been avoiding, the inconvenient truth at the heart of our polite charade. Michael clears his throat, preparing to offer another vague explanation about distance and circumstances. But something in me snaps. Maybe it's the genuine innocence of Lily's question. Or maybe it's the accumulation of 2 decades of inadequate explanations and half-truths. "Because," I say gently, looking directly at her, "your daddy and I had a very serious fight a long time ago before you were born. And sometimes when adults fight, they stop talking for a long time. The silence that follows is deafening." Michael looks at me with an expression of panic and anger. Panic because I've just shattered the carefully constructed narrative that shields his daughters from the truth about our family, and anger because I've done it in front of his wife and daughters, forcing him to confront our story in public. Sarah looks shocked, as if finally understanding that our family situation is far more complicated than Michael let on. Emma and Lily look at me with new eyes, processing this revelation. To them, the idea that adults, especially families, can fight so badly that they stop speaking to each other for decades is probably incomprehensible. They live in a world of emotional stability, where conflicts are resolved with conversations and hugs, where family is a safe haven, not an emotional battlefield. "But now you've made up?" Emma asks, and her innocent hope breaks my heart. She wants to believe in a happy resolution, a fairy tale ending where all wounds are healed and the whole family lives happily ever after. How can I explain to a 9-year-old that some wounds never fully heal, that some burned bridges can never be rebuilt, that this dinner might be less about reconciliation and more about financial expediency? "We're trying," I answer honestly, because it's the only answer I can give that's both truthful and hopeful. Michael gives me a look that's part gratitude and part warning, grateful that I haven't completely shattered the girls' illusion of family reconciliation, but warning me not to reveal any more inconvenient truths. The rest of dinner continues in a shifting atmosphere, where we're all consciously avoiding dangerous topics, carefully stepping around the emotional landmine I've just exposed. After dinner, we move into the living room, where presents await in a carefully arranged pile beneath a Christmas tree that looks like it came straight out of a department store window. Each ornament is perfectly positioned. The lights twinkle in a coordinated sequence, and there's an impressive array of presents already beneath it, all wrapped in the same gold paper with red ribbons. Clearly professionally purchased and wrapped, my presents, with their colorful, hastily chosen at the mall paper, look out of place and amateurish in this setting of domestic perfection. Emma and Lily sit on the expensive Persian rug, their legs crossed in a controlled anticipation that suggests they've been instructed in appropriate behavior for this special occasion. Sarah settles into an elegant armchair, a glass of wine in hand, observing the scene with the discreet vigilance mothers develop when they need to mediate socially complex situations. Michael stands near the fireplace, a casual hand on the marble mantelpiece, looking relaxed but actually tense as a violin string about to snap. Well, I say, my voice sounding artificially cheerful. Who wants to open presents first? It's an unnecessary question. I can see Emma is practically vibrating with excitement while Lily bites her lower lip in an attempt to contain her enthusiasm. They're normal children after all, despite their formal education and luxurious surroundings. The promise of gifts still awakens in them that pure joy only children can feel, untainted by the emotional complications that gifts pose for the adults in the room. Emma opens hers first, tearing open the paper with the enthusiasm I expected, and her squeal of joy when she sees the professional art kit is worth every penny of the $300 it cost. Look, Lily, these are real paints, like real artists use. She removes each item from the kit with reverence. Natural bristle brushes, tubes of oil paint in vibrant colors, stretched canvases, a portable easel that folds into a sleek case. It's the kind of gift I never could have given Michael when he was a child. The kind that says, "Your dreams matter and deserve investment." Lily opens her gift more carefully, unwrapping it slowly as if savoring the moment. When she sees the collection of picture books, stories about brave girls who save kingdoms and solve mysteries, her eyes light up in a way that reminds me of Michael at 6, when I read to him every night before bed. "They're beautiful," she whispers, turning the pages with delicate fingers. "Thank you, Grandma Margaret." The way she says my name now is different, less formal, more warm. "And this is for you, Sarah," I say, holding out the small jewelry box wrapped in silver paper. Sarah looks genuinely surprised, clearly not expecting to be included in the gift-giving. She opens the box carefully and gasps softly when she sees the delicate necklace with a pearl pendant. "Margaret, you didn't have to. It's beautiful." For the first time since I arrived, her smile seems genuine, not polite. It's a small but meaningful moment, a bridge built between two women who love the same man in different ways. Michael watches all this with a complex expression that I can't fully interpret. There's pride there, pride that his daughters are behaving well, that his wife is being gracious, that this delicate situation is being navigated without dramatic outbursts. But there's also discomfort, as if my generosity has placed him in a position he doesn't know how to handle. For all these years, he could relegate me to the role of poor, failed mother. But now he has to deal with a version of me who can give his daughters things he himself might not be able to afford. "These are very generous gifts," he finally says, and I can hear layers of meaning in his words. Generous can mean appropriate or excessive, depending on your perspective. To me, they're desperate attempts to make up for years of absence. To him, they might be overly obvious displays of newfound wealth, awkward reminders that our family dynamic has changed in ways neither of us knows how to process. "Emma," Sarah says gently, "why don't you show your drawings to Grandma Margaret now?" It's a diplomatic suggestion, a way to create a private moment between grandmother and granddaughter that can build genuine connection beyond expensive gifts. Emma jumps up immediately, still clutching one of the new paintbrushes, and extends her small, warm hand. "Come, Grandma." My room is upstairs. Following Emma upstairs is like stepping into a time capsule of a thriving childhood. The hallway walls are covered with family photos, documenting years of growing up that I completely missed. First steps, first days of school, school festivals, tropical beach vacations, holidays with Sarah's real grandparents. I'm a phantom presence in this family gallery, a void where there should be more photos, more memories, more shared history. Emma's room is a 9-year-old's dream, purple walls with glittering stars on the ceiling, a white canopied bed, and shelves filled with neatly arranged books and toys. But what immediately catches my eye are her artworks, drawings and paintings covering an entire wall, some professionally framed, others held together with colorful tape. There are landscapes, portraits, and colorful abstractions that showcase real talent and a vibrant imagination. It's the kind of room I dreamed of giving Michael, a space where creativity is celebrated and nurtured. This is my favorite, Emma says, pointing to a painting of a family of rabbits having a picnic under an enormous tree. I entered it for the school art contest and won first place. The pride in her voice is contagious, and I feel my heart expand with the love of a grandmother who finally has a tangible object. This talented, sweet girl is my granddaughter, my family, my blood. Despite all the lost years, despite all the emotional turmoil, she exists and is wonderful. It's amazing, I say, and I mean it sincerely. You have a very special talent, Emma. These drawings are better than many things I've seen in galleries. She lights up at the compliment, and for a moment I can see Michael in her, not the bitter, resentful Michael who rejected me, but the little Michael who used to show me his school projects with pride, before the world taught him I wasn't worthy of his admiration. We sit on her small bed, and she shows me each drawing, telling stories about when she made them, explaining her techniques with the seriousness only children apply to their hobbies. Mommy said maybe I take after you, she says casually, flipping through a sketchbook. She said you like art too. It's interesting how Sarah planted this seed of connection, bridging the gap between us through an interest I barely possess. I've always thought I'd like to learn, I reply carefully, not wanting to destroy the connection Sarah has so generously facilitated. Perhaps you could teach me some techniques while I'm here. Emma's eyes light up at the prospect of being a teacher, of sharing knowledge rather than just receiving gifts. It's a genuine moment between us, perhaps the first since I arrived. It's then that I hear raised voices coming from below, Michael and Sarah having an intense conversation in low but urgent tones. I can't make out specific words, but I can feel the tension through the walls. Emma continues talking about art, seemingly oblivious to the adult drama unfolding downstairs. But a part of me knows that whatever this conversation is about is me, about what my presence means, about what to do with myself, about how to navigate this complex emotional territory that neither of us has adequately mapped. Grandma Margaret, Emma says suddenly, her voice growing more serious. Will you come back to visit us again? Or will it be another 20 years until the next time? The question hits me like a punch in the gut, not because of its cruel innocence, but because of the emotional intelligence it reveals. At 9, Emma already understands that our reunion is no guarantee of a future relationship, that this moment may be an exception rather than a new beginning. I'd love to come back, I answer honestly. If you'd like to visit again, and if your parents would agree. It's the most honest answer I can give. It acknowledges that I want continued connection, but also the reality that I'm not the one in control of whether that happens. Emma processes this with the seriousness only children apply to complicated adult truths, and I can see that she understands more about our family situation than any child should need to. The voices downstairs grow louder for a moment, then abruptly stop. I hear footsteps on the stairs, someone hurrying up. A few seconds later, Sarah appears in Emma's bedroom doorway, her face a carefully controlled mask of strained politeness. Emma, dear, why don't you go downstairs to Daddy and Lily? Grandma Margaret and I will talk for a minute. Emma looks between us with that keen intuition children have for adult tensions, but obeys without question, taking one of her new books with her. Her small footsteps echo down the stairs, and then we're alone. Two women who love the same man in different ways, about to confront truths neither of us truly wants to face. Sarah closes the door behind Emma and leans against her, as if needing physical support for what she's about to say. Margaret, she begins, her voice controlled but trembling slightly at the edges. I need to speak honestly with you about a few things. She moves to the bedroom window, looking out at the perfectly lit street where other upper-middle-class families are likely having their own uneventful Christmas celebrations. Michael told me a few things about you too, about what really happened 20 years ago. But after your conversation at dinner today, he told me more. My stomach churns. What did he say? The words come out as a whisper, because a part of me already knows that whatever revelation comes next will be devastating. All these years, I've held on to the hope that Michael would eventually understand that I did the best I could with the impossible circumstances I faced as a poor single mother. That he would realize that love can manifest itself in imperfect ways, through unseen sacrifices and desperate decisions that seem wrong to outsiders. Sarah turns to face me, and I can see tears forming in the corners of her eyes. He told me you knew about the college fund his grandfather, your ex-husband's father, had set up for him. That there was $50,000 waiting for him since he was 10, and that you used that money for other things. The words fall on me like physical blows, each more devastating than the last. The college fund. How could Sarah know about that? The memory comes back like a bitter wave. My former father-in-law's lawyer calling me 2 years after Robert died, informing me about an account that had been established for Michael. $50,000, a fortune to me at the time, but earmarked exclusively for his college education. The lawyer was very clear about the conditions. The money could only be accessed when Michael turned 18, and only for approved educational expenses. But there was a medical emergency clause that could release funds earlier, with proper legal approval. Sarah, my voice cracks, you don't understand. I never touched that spending money, never. But even as I say the words, I know how they must sound, like the pathetic excuses of someone caught in a lie. When Michael was 15, he had that bike accident. Remember how he broke his leg in 3 places? The surgery to insert the metal pins cost $47,000. Our insurance only covered a fraction. I had to dip into my college fund or lose our house to medical debt. Tears begin to stream down my face as the memory of those horrific days returns with full force. Michael in the hospital, screaming in pain. The doctors telling me that without surgery, he could limp for the rest of his life. The hospital administrator explaining that they couldn't proceed without guaranteed payment. Me, sitting in that cold hospital room at 3 in the morning, signing papers, authorizing the use of university funds for emergency medical expenses, knowing I was destroying my son's educational future to save his ability to walk normally. I tried to explain it to him at the time. I continue, my voice breaking completely now, but he was in so much pain from the medication. And then, when he recovered, he was so angry at me for everything, for the poverty, for the lack of opportunities, for not being like other mothers. I thought that when he got older, he would understand that I had no choice, that I saved his legs, even if it meant sacrificing his dream education. Sarah looks at me with an expression that slowly shifts from accusation to something more complex, confusion, maybe even compassion. Margaret, she says softly, Michael told me you used the money to pay off credit card debt and past due bills, that you lied to him about where the money had gone. He said he only discovered the truth when he tried to access the fund at 18 and learned it was empty. He never let me explain. The words came out in a burst of 2 decades of frustration and pain. When he found out the money had been used, he accused me of stealing his future. I tried to tell him about the medical bills, about the surgery, about how I had no choice, but he was so furious, so convinced I was a failure who selfishly destroyed his opportunities, that he couldn't hear the truth. He screamed that I was a liar, that I always found excuses for my failures. Sarah sits heavily in Emma's small chair, processing this revelation. Do you have any receipts? Medical documents that show where the money was actually used? Her question is practical, legal, but also filled with hope. The hope that perhaps this devastating family situation may be based on misunderstanding rather than true betrayal. Because if you do, you need to show Michael. He's based 20 years of resentment on a version of events that may be completely wrong. Of course I do, I reply, wiping away tears with the back of my hand. I have all the medical documents, all the hospital bills, all the legal paperwork authorizing the use of the emergency medical fund. They're stored in a folder at my house. I've kept them all, hoping one day I'll have the opportunity to show Michael that I'm not the monster he thinks I am. The irony hits me like a slap in the face. I've been demonized for 2 decades for a crime I never committed, while the real crime was saving my son's physical mobility. My God, Sarah whispers, covering her face with her hands. Margaret, do you understand what this means? Michael built all his anger, all his resentment, all his justification for cutting you out of his life on a lie he told himself, because he was in too much pain and wounded pride to hear the truth. She lifts her eyes to mine, and I can see genuine horror there. Horror at realizing that her family was built on a foundation of misunderstandings and unspoken truths. We hear heavy footsteps on the stairs, Michael coming up, probably impatient with our private conversation. Sarah and I look at each other, both knowing that the next moment will change everything. For better or worse, the truth will finally be revealed after 2 decades buried under wounded pride and failed communication. Sarah stands and opens the door before Michael can knock. Michael, she says, her voice strangely firm. You need to sit down and listen to something. And this time, you really need to listen, not just wait your turn to talk. He enters the room looking angry and defensive, clearly hoping Sarah has put me in my place or set limits on future visits. But when he sees my tear-stained face and Sarah's serious expression, his demeanor changes slightly. What's going on? He asks, his voice carrying the wariness people use when they sense they're about to receive news that will change everything. Sarah guides him to sit on the edge of Emma's bed, and I remain standing by the window, trying to summon the courage to finally tell him my side of a story he's refused to hear for 20 years. Michael, I begin, my voice shaking but determined. Do you remember the surgery you had when you were 15? When you broke your leg and needed the metal pins? He frowns, clearly confused as to why I'm bringing this up. Do you remember how much it cost? $47,000. Do you remember how I paid for it? I can see understanding dawning in his eyes, but also resistance. 20 years of established narrative isn't easy to challenge. I used the college fund to pay for your surgery, Michael. Not for credit card bills or personal expenses. To save your legs. To ensure you could walk normally for the rest of your life. The words come out in a rush, as if I'm afraid he'll interrupt me before I can tell him everything. I have all the medical documents, all the receipts. I always have. You never gave me a chance to show them to you. The silence that follows is absolute. Michael looks at me as if he's seeing a ghost, processing information that utterly destroys the foundation on which he's built 2 decades of righteous anger. Sarah watches them both, their hands clasped, waiting to see if this revelation will be the beginning of healing or only create deeper wounds. You're lying, he finally says, but his voice lacks conviction. It's the automatic response of someone who has invested so much time and emotional energy in a version of reality that he can't easily abandon it, even when faced with contrary evidence. You always lie when you get caught. You always have an excuse for everything. Michael Morrison, Sarah says, her voice cutting through her denial like a blade. Your mother isn't lying, and you know it in your heart. You remember that surgery. You remember the bills. You remember how she worked triple shifts for months to pay for all the other medical expenses that insurance wouldn't cover. And you chose to believe the worst possible version of the truth because it was easier to blame her for all your problems than to accept it. Sometimes life is impossible and mothers make impossible choices to protect their children, Sarah's words hang in the air like a final judgment. And I can see Michael crumbling under the weight of the realization that he's spent 20 years hating the wrong woman for the wrong reasons. His hands tremble, his face pales, and for a moment he looks exactly like the 17-year-old boy who yelled at me that December night 2 decades ago. Broken, confused, and desperately needing someone to blame for the fact that life isn't fair, he whispers finally. And for the first time in 20 years, the word comes out softly, full of recognition rather than formal obligation. Mom, I didn't know. I thought. I always thought, but he can't finish the sentence. Because there are no adequate words for 2 decades of misunderstanding, for a family torn apart by pride and failed communication, for the love that was wasted for so long based on false premises. I cross the room and sit beside him on the small bed, the same way I used to when he was little and had nightmares. This time, I'm the one holding him as he cries. Not the tears of a frustrated boy who can't get what he wants, but the tears of a grown man who finally understands the weight of his mother's sacrifices and the terrible price they both paid for 2 decades of unspoken truth. Christmas ends not with the fairy tale reconciliation I secretly hoped for, nor with the confirmation of my worst fears about financial motivations. It ends with something much more complex and real, the painful beginnings of mutual understanding, the recognition that love sometimes manifests itself through choices that seem wrong from the outside, and the acceptance that some wounds take decades to heal, but that it's never too late to start healing. As I leave his house that night, I know there's still a lot of emotional work ahead, but for the first time in 20 years, I believe that maybe, just maybe, we can still figure out how to be a family again.